Hi everyone and welcome back to Story Corner. I'm Pippi Longstocking and I'm here today to read the last chapter of my book. The last chapter is called Pippi Celebrates Her Birthday, so it only makes sense that I'm here and I brought some friends. Mr. Nelson and Horse is here too. Okay, here we go. One day, Tommy and Annika found a letter in their mailbox. It was addressed to Timmy and Annika, and when they opened it, they found a card which read, "Timmy and Annika are invitable to Pippi's tomorrow, her birthday party. Dress whatever you would like to wear." Tommy and Annika were so happy they began to skip and dance. They understood perfectly what was printed on the card, although the spelling was a little unusual. Pippi had had a great deal of trouble writing it. To be sure, she had not recognized the letter T in school the day she was there, but all the same, she could write a little. When she was sailing on the ocean, one of the sailors on her father's ship used to take her up on deck in the evening now and then and tried to teach her to write. Unfortunately, Pippi was not a very patient pupil. All of a sudden, she would say, "No, Fridroff," and that was his name. "No, Fridroff, bother all this learning. I can't study any more now because I must climb the mast to see what kind of weather we're going to have tomorrow." So it was no wonder the writing didn't go so well now. One whole night she sat struggling with that invitation, and at dawn, just as the stars were starting to pale in the sky over Villa Villacula, she tiptoed over to Tommy and Annika's house and dropped the letter into their mailbox. As soon as Tommy and Annika came home from school, they began to get all dressed up for the party. Annika asked her mother to curl her hair, and her mother did, and tied it with a big pink satin bow. Tommy combed his hair with water so that it would lie all nice and smooth. He certainly didn't want any curls. Then Annika wanted to put on her very best dress, but her mother thought she'd better not, for she was seldom neat and clean when she came home from Pippi's. So Annika had to be satisfied with her next best dress. Tommy didn't care what suit he wore as long as he looked nice. But of course, they had brought Pippi a present. They had taken the money out of their own piggy banks, and on the way home from school had run into the toy shop on Main Street and bought her a very beautiful, well, what they had bought her was a secret for the time being. There it lay, wrapped with green paper and tied with a great deal of string. And when they were ready, Tommy took the package and off they went, followed by their mother's warning to take good care of their clothes. Annika was to carry the package part of the way, and they were both to hold it when they handed it to Pippi. That they had agreed upon. It was already November and dusk came early. When Tommy and Annika went in through the gates of Villa Villacula, they held each other's hands tightly, because it was quite dark in Pippi's garden and the wind sighed mournfully through the bare old trees. "Seems like fall," said Tommy. It was so much pleasanter to see the light in the windows of Villa Villacula and to know that they were going to a birthday party. Ordinarily, Tommy and Annika rushed in through the doors of the kitchen, but this time they went in the front door. The horse was not on the porch. Tommy gave a lively knock on the door. From inside, a low voice came. "Who comes in the dark night on the road in my house? Is it a ghost or just a poor little mouse?" "No, no, Pippi, it's us," shrieked Annika. "Open the door." Pippi opened the door. "Oh, Pippi, why did you say that about ghosts?" "I was so scared," said Annika, and completely forgot to congratulate Pippi. Pippi laughed heartily and opened the door to the kitchen. How good it was to come in when it was light and warm. The birthday party was to be in the kitchen, because that was the most pleasant room in the house. There were only two other rooms on the first floor, the parlor, in which there was only one piece of furniture, and Pippi's bedroom. The kitchen was large and roomy, and Pippi had scrubbed it until it shone. She had put rugs on the floor and large new cloth on the table. She had embroidered the cloth herself with flowers that certainly looked most remarkable, but Pippi declared that such flowers grew in the farthest of India, so of course that made them all right. The curtains were drawn and the fire burned merrily. In a corner stood the horse. Shh, horse, we're trying to read a story. Where was I? Oh yes. In a corner stood the horse, for he too had been invited to the party. Not if you keep interrupting me though. Now, at last, Tommy and Annika remembered that they were supposed to congratulate Pippi. Tommy bowed and Annika curtsied, and then they handed Pippi a green package and said, "May we congratulate you and wish you a happy birthday." Pippi thanked them and eagerly tore the package open, and there was a music box. Pippi was wild with delight. She patted Tommy and she patted Annika and she patted the music box and she patted the wrapping paper. She wound up the music box, and with much plinking and plonking, out came a lovely melody. Pippi wound and seemed to forget everything else, but suddenly she remembered something. "Oh my goodness, you must have your birthday presents too," she said. "But it isn't our birthday," said Tommy and Annika. Pippi stared at them in amazement. "No, but it's my birthday, isn't it? And so I can give you both birthday presents too, can't I? Or does it say in your school books that such a thing can't be done? Is it something to do with that old pluffification that makes it impossible?" "Oh, of course it's possible," said Tommy. "It just isn't customary. But for my part, I'd be very glad to have a present." "Me too," said Annika. Pippi ran into the parlor and brought back 2 packages from the chest. When Tommy opened his, he found a little ivory flute, and in Annika's package was a lovely brooch shaped like a butterfly. The wings of the butterfly were set with blue and red and green stones. When they had all had their birthday presents, it was time to sit down at the table where there were all sorts of cakes and buns. The cakes were rather peculiar in shape, but Pippi declared they were just the kind of cakes they had in China. Pippi served hot chocolate with whipped cream, and the children were just about to begin their feast when Tommy said, "When Mama and Papa have a party, the gentlemen always get cards telling them which ladies to take into dinner. I think we ought to have cards too." "Okay," said Pippi, "although it will be kind of hard for us because I'm the only gentleman here," added Tommy, doubtfully. "Fiddlesticks," said Pippi. "Do you think Mr. Nelson is a lady? Maybe." "Of course not. I forgot Mr. Nelson," said Tommy, and he sat down on the woodbox and wrote on a card, "Mr. Tommy will have the pleasure of taking Miss Longstocking to dinner." "That's me," he said with satisfaction, and showed Pippi the card. Then he wrote on the next card, "Mr. Nelson will have the pleasure of taking Miss Annika to dinner." "Okay, but the horse must have a card too," said Pippi decidedly, "even if he can't sit at the table." So Tommy, at Pippi's dictation, wrote, "The horse will have the pleasure of remaining in the corner where he will be served cakes and sugar." Pippi held the card under the horse's nose and said, "Read this and see what you think of it." As the horse had no objection to make, Tommy offered Pippi his arm, and they walked to the table. Mr. Nelson showed no intention of offering his arm to Annika. "Very rude of you, Mr. Nelson." So she took a firm hold of him and lifted him up into the table. But he didn't want to sit on a chair. He insisted on sitting right on the table. Typical Mr. Nelson. Nor did he want any chocolate with whipped cream. But when Pippi poured water in his cup, he took it in both hands and drank. Annika and Tommy and Pippi ate and ate, and Annika said that if these cakes were the kind they had in China, then she intended to move to China when she grew up. Mr. Nelson had emptied his cup. He turned it upside down and put it on his head. When Pippi saw that, she did the same, but as she had not drunk quite all of her chocolate, a little stream ran down her forehead and over her nose. She caught it with her tongue and lapped it all up. "Waste not, want not," she said. Tommy and Annika licked their cups clean before they put them on their heads. When everybody had had enough and the horse had had his share, Pippi took hold of all 4 corners of the tablecloth and lifted it up so that the cups and plates tumbled over each other as if they were in a stack. Then she stuffed the whole bundle in the woodbox. "I always like to tidy up a little as soon as I have eaten," she said. Then it was time for games. Pippi suggested that they play a game called Don't Touch the Floor. It was very simple. The only thing one had to do was walk around the kitchen without once stepping on the floor. Pippi skipped around in the twinkling of an eye, and even for Tommy and Annika it was quite easy. You began on the drain board, and if you stretched your legs enough, it was possible to step onto the back of the stove. From the stove to the woodbox, and from the woodbox to the hat shelf, and down onto the table, and from there across 2 chairs to the corner cupboard. Between the corner cupboard and the drain board was a distance of several feet, but luckily there stood the horse, and if you climbed up on him at the tail end and slid off at the head end, making a quick turn at exactly the right moment, you landed exactly on the drain board again. When they had played this game for a while, and Annika's dress was no longer her next best dress, but her next best one, and Tommy had become as black as a chimney sweep, then they decided to think up something else. Here's a picture of the party we had. "Suppose we go up to the attic and visit the ghosts," suggested Pippi. Annika gasped. "Are there really ghosts in the attic?" she asked. "Are there ghosts? Millions," said Pippi. "It's just swarming with all sorts of ghosts and spirits. You trip over them wherever you walk. Shall we go up?" "Oh, Pippi," said Annika, and looked reproachfully at her. "Mama says there aren't any such things as ghosts and goblins," said Tommy boldly. "And well she might," said Pippi, "because there aren't any anywhere else." All the ghosts in the world live in my attic, and it doesn't pay to try and make them move, but they aren't dangerous. They just pinch you in the arm so you get black and blue, and they howl, and they play ninepins with their heads. Do they really play ninepins with their heads? Sure, that's what they do, said Pippi. Come on, let's go up and talk with them. I'm good at playing ninepins. Tommy didn't want to show that he was frightened, and in a way, he really did want to see a ghost. That would be something to tell the boys at school. Besides, he consoled himself with the thought that the ghost probably wouldn't dare to hurt Pippi. He decided to go along. Poor Annika didn't want to go under any circumstances. But then she happened to think that a tiny little ghost might sneak downstairs while she was sitting alone in the kitchen. That decided the matter. Better to be with Pippi and Tommy among thousands of ghosts than alone in the kitchen with even the tiniest little ghost child. Pippi went first. She opened the door to the attic stairs. It was pitch dark there. Tommy took a firm grip on Pippi, and Annika took an even firmer grip on Tommy. And so they went up. The stairs creaked and squeaked with every step. Tommy began to wonder if it wouldn't have been better to stay in the kitchen, and Annika didn't even need to wonder. She was sure of it. At last they came to the top of the stairs and stood in the attic. It was pitch dark there too, except where a little moonbeam shone on the floor. There were sighs and mysterious noises in every corner when the wind blew in through the cracks. Hi, all you ghosts, shrieked Pippi. But if there were any ghosts there, he certainly didn't answer. Well, I might have known, said Pippi. They've gone to a council meeting of the Ghosts and Goblin Society. Annika sighed with relief and hoped that the meeting would last a long time. But just then, an awful sound came from one of the corners of the attic. Ooh, it said, and a moment later, Tommy saw something come rushing towards him in the dimness. He felt it brush his forehead and saw something disappear through a little window that stood opened. He shrieked to high heaven, "A ghost! A ghost!" Annika shrieked with him. "The poor thing will be late for the meeting," said Pippi. If it was a ghost, and not an owl for the matter. There aren't any ghosts, she continued after a while. If anybody insists that there are ghosts, I'll tweak 'em in the nose. Yes, but you said yourself, said Annika. Is that so? Did I? Said Pippi. Well then, I certainly will tweak my own nose. And she got a firm grip on her nose and tweaked it. After that, Tommy and Annika felt a little calmer. In fact, they were now so courageous that they ventured to go up to the window and look out over the garden. Big dark clouds sailed through the sky and did their best to hide the moon, and the wind sighed in the trees. Tommy and Annika turned around. But then, oh horrors, they saw a white figure coming towards them. "A ghost!" shrieked Tommy wildly. Annika was so scared she couldn't even shriek. The ghost came nearer and nearer. Tommy and Annika hugged each other and shut their eyes. But then they heard the ghost say, "Look what I found! Papa's nightshirt and an old sea chest over here. If I hem it up around the bottom, I can wear it." Pippi came up to them with the nightshirt dangling around her legs. "Oh, Pippi, I could have died of fright," said Annika. "But nightshirts aren't dangerous," Pippi assured her. "They don't bite anyone, except in self-defense." Pippi now decided to examine the sea chest thoroughly. She lifted it up and carried it over to the window and opened the cover, so that what little moonlight there was fell on the contents of the chest. There were a great many old clothes, which she threw out on the floor. There was a telescope, a few books, 3 pistols, a sword, and a bag of gold pieces. "Tiddly-pum and piddly-dee," said Pippi contentedly. "It's so exciting," said Tommy. Pippi gathered everything in the nightshirt, and down they went to the kitchen again. Annika was perfectly satisfied to leave the attic. "Now we can organize a robber band if we want to," said Pippi. She held a telescope up to her eyes. "With this I can almost see the fleas in South America, I think," she continued. "And it'll be good to have it if we do organize a robber band." Just then there was a knock at the door. It was Tommy and Annika's father, who had come to take them home. It was long past their bedtime, he said. Tommy and Annika hurried to say thank you, bid Pippi goodbye, and collect all of their belongings, the flute, the brooch, and the pistols. Pippi followed her guest out to the porch and watched them disappear through the garden. They turned around to wave. The light from inside shone on her. There she stood with her stiff red braids, dressed in her father's nightgown, which billowed around her feet. In one hand she held a pistol, and in the other a sword. She saluted with them. When Tommy and Annika and their father reached the gate, they heard her calling. They stopped to listen. The wind whistled through the trees so that they could just barely hear what she said. "I'm going to be a pirate when I grow up," she cried. "Are you?" And that's the end of my book, Pippi Longstocking. Bye from me, Mr. Nelson, and Horse.